Hey, good morning, everyone. Now, you might have noticed it's a little more difficult to afford a house these days. And it's not only that, you might notice that groceries are more expensive or they give you less in the bag than you used to get. It seems that the quality of life these days is debatably getting a little more rough, let's put it that way. And this seems to be actually something broader happening in society right now. Now, let me explain, right? It's not really just something one person is seeing. Americans overall seem to be recognizing this, and it's tying into some broader problems, like, for example, like the retirement crisis. We're facing a depression crisis, we're facing a loneliness crisis, and when you look at the whole picture of this, it suggests that maybe there's something we should look at a bit more carefully, let's put it that way. Now look, when it comes to this retirement crisis, according to statistics, 30% of Americans say they owe more money on their credit cards than they have in retirement savings. And I'll be going into what this crisis will mean for, frankly, all of us, because that'll catch up with us in a few years. Walmart, on another note, interesting stuff happening. They've announced a new payment system. They're going to start bypassing the use of credit cards by letting customers pay directly through their bank accounts. And that's going to be interesting because maybe it can help break some of that credit card debt crisis we're having, which is barreling towards all the other things. And like on the Walmart thing, I know it sounds a whole lot like digital currency, but I think it's different. I'll be going into why I think that later in the show. And also hey folks, it's election season, which means it's virus season. There's growing cases of H5N1 avian virus. And in China, this has been a thing for a long time. And it's finding ways now to possibly spread to human beings. And in light of this, well, the old FDA, they proposed a new vaccine approval process for pandemics, really kind of embodying what Trump did with Operation Warp Speed. Now, look, I'll be talking about all these topics today. Let's jump into it. Now, look, Americans are facing a new crisis where many do not have a plan for retirement and many feel they can never retire. Democrat and Republican voters alike, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, they have been in agreement on this issue, noting that there's a retirement savings crisis already brewing. Now, this issue ties into a broader problem in overall quality of life. Take a look at this. This is USA Today. It says, in an August survey, BlackRock asked 1,000 registered voters for their thoughts on retirement security in America. It says the response has transcended party lines. When the survey asked voters if they think there is a retirement savings crisis in the country, 93% of Republicans answered yes, and they were joined by 86% of Democrats and 94% of independents. That is the overwhelming majority of Americans. Now look, notice that 3/4 of Republicans say they are concerned about not being able to maintain their standard of living in retirement, joined by 3/4 of Democrats and a slightly smaller share of independents. People are in agreement that the quality of life is becoming more difficult. And look, this is important, and I'm going to go into this in a bit, a little more. When we talk about the state of the economy, now you can look at the stock markets. Hey, it's doing great. You can see a lot of the stocks doing very well. They keep saying, hey, rally in the stock market. But that doesn't always reflect in quality of life in what the individual citizen is experiencing. And if you have high 80%, 90% of Americans believing that their quality of life is reducing, that sends a very different message on the real state that we're in right now. Now look, this issue has been a growing one. A Ramsey's Solutions State of Personal Finance report from last month stated that the state of personal finance in America is full of anxiety and uncertainty, which they attribute to rising prices and shrinking household budgets. People have less money. And take a look at this. The report also noted that over 1/3 of Americans, 37%, say they owe more money on their credit cards than they have in their retirement savings. Look, that's right. Over 1/3 of Americans have more credit card debt than they have for their retirement. Meaning the short-term problems they're having, which are going to compound as they get older, an inescapable debt cycle, is eating away at their future well-being. Now, that's not just a personal crisis, That is a crisis for the future of this country when that catches up with everybody. A report from February this year by Senator Bernie Sanders, as chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, that's the HELP committee, noted some even more concerning statistics. Take a look at this. Nearly half of Americans 55 and older have no retirement savings. Current state of things, 55 and older. Roughly 52% of Americans 65 and older are living on less than $30,000 annually. And 1 in 4 survive on less than $15,000 per year. That puts you in the poverty level, folks. It notes that nearly half of all Americans are at risk of a financially insecure retirement, up from 1 in 3 workers in 1983. That's Bernie Sanders. Look, this is actually a big deal. Medicare is drying up. People my age, if I'm not working and I need Medicare, it's probably not going to be there when I get older. People don't have emergency funds, let alone retirement funds. And people are having fewer kids also. Kids used to be the old school retirement plan. When you talked about old school Medicare and old school retirement, that was having lots of kids. You have 10 or 12 of them, and hopefully one of them is gonna believe in filial piety enough to take care of you in your old age. I'm doing that with my daughter. I'm like, kid, it's important to care for your elders, because you want them to care for you want them to care for you when you get older, right? Now look, the prospect a lot of Americans are facing, though, they don't have the money they need to retire. They're having fewer kids. A lot of them are not getting married, and funds from Medicare and things like that are going away also. We're eating into the budget. Now look, note this from CNN. It's not just work, health, and so on, right? There's also a growing problem of mental health. Last year, a Gallup report found 18% of adults in America suffer from depression. That's a lot of people. That's close to 1 in 5, in fact, right? Or have received treatment for depression, and that was an increase of more than 7% since 2015, suggesting that depression is getting worse. Now look at this as well. There's also another type of epidemic, loneliness. And this is something new. You'd think that with the internet, connecting all of us, we've never been more connected, that people feel less connected. Despite your ability to pull out your phone and talk to your friend from high school or middle school who you lost contact with, people are more lonely. According to a new Gallup survey, 20% of U.S. adults report feeling loneliness. And let's have a look at this. This is Gallup. 20% of U.S. adults in Gallup's most recent quarterly data report feeling loneliness a lot of the day yesterday, a slight uptick in the rate after several quarters when it hovered around 17% or 18%. Again, about 1 in 5. And note that still, the current rate remains lower than the 25% highs measured 3 times, most recently in March of 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you could argue that the pandemic was a different situation because obviously if you're locked in your house, right, remember the lockdowns, you're probably going to feel a bit lonely. But even after getting out of that state, a lot of people have maintained that. Now you can attribute that to more people working from home. A lot of offices are trying to end that, notably. But I'd say actually it's a longer-term problem, despite, again, the fact that technology has connected all of us. Human person-to-person interaction has gone away. Look, do you all remember back in the 90s? Let's go way back in time. Do you remember if you wanted to visit your friend, what you did? All right, do you remember that? Well, you picked up the phone with the wire on it, right? You dialed their phone number and you said, hey, do you want to hang out? It wasn't often, at least for me, right? It wasn't often times like you were trying to just chat endlessly. Hey, let's text instead of calling. Or you just went over to their house and you knocked on their door and saw if they were home. Human interaction was the purpose of digital connection back then. If you called somebody, if you were trying to get in touch with somebody, it was usually because you wanted to hang out in person. Human-to-human interaction was the goal of digital interaction. And that has since changed, where digital interaction has become the go-to form of interaction for a lot of people. Now, look, the Gallup report goes into more detail on the significance of this. It ties into the overall problem of quality of life and hope for the future. And if you understand loneliness, depression, money problems, the whole 9 yards, this is a much bigger problem than just one isolated part of it. Gallup says this: significant daily loneliness in the U.S. is closely linked to many aspects of well-being, including current life satisfaction and anticipated life satisfaction in 5 years. It notes that loneliness and expectations for one's future life are also related, but the association is weaker than for loneliness and current life evaluations. From a well-being perspective, tangible aspects of life experiences can play a significant role in reducing the chances of experiencing loneliness. Liking what you do each day, a core aspect of career well-being, represents having a natural right fit in one's day-to-day activities. It is also a part of well-being that employers can greatly influence, they say. Although I don't think it's your boss's job to make you happy, although maybe they can contribute to it by making your life a bit easier, right? But it knows that for those who do not like what they do every day, the rates of burnout, unplanned absenteeism, a big problem with my generation, by the way, I've been told, and turnover, people just leaving their jobs and looking for something else all the time, all rise substantially. Now, this relates to some broader problems we're seeing in the world, at least in my opinion. In the United States, there's a growing problem of young men just checking out. They're not pushing themselves like they used to. They don't have goals. They might work, but they'll do the bare minimum to pay rent and maybe play some video games, and they don't want to do anything beyond that. The idea of getting married for a lot of them seems like a threat. They're like, well, why would I get into a contractual agreement where I can lose half of what I own? They don't see a reason for it, and they view the threats being greater than the benefits. And what's the result? Well, you have them living in squalor. You have them living in states that are not really making them happy a lot of times. And they maintain those states because they believe the dangers of, let's say, contractual agreements and dating and so on are greater than the benefits it could bring to them. And a lot of that comes notably through some of the cultural changes we've gone through. No-fault divorce. I'd say that maybe unrealistic expectations over what marriage is. You're probably going to have a lot of arguments, but you can work together to build a better life together. And also the people forgetting the fact that, hey, a lot of them succeed too, right? And people being able to work out their differences and grow together is part of the human experience, not to mention having a family. There's a timer on having a family. If you don't do it when you're younger, you might miss the boat. Now, look, this actually ties into other problems. With the internet and social media, interactions are getting more complicated. There's less face-to-face communications, and add to all that the stresses of modern workplaces, social pressures, things like growing debt, people dealing with a lot of these things, and people are looking simply for ways to not deal with these problems. Now, how many of you have experienced this? You had the wonderful experience of finding all the people you used to know on social media. You found your best friend from middle school and all the guys you used to hang out with or girls you used to hang out with through high school and all that stuff. And then someone posts a political view on there and it turns into an argument. Or maybe, for example, you say something that someone else finds offensive, there's a long list of things people find offensive these days, and people attack you. You get in arguments online that go nowhere, and what happens? Well, you stop posting those things because you don't want to deal with it. Human interaction has become more complicated. And it's different from, again, when I was a kid, my memory of these things, because I don't think I cared about the political views of my friends. Dating was less complicated. Do you all remember back dating in the 90s or, before my time, I guess, before that? A lot of people are getting burned out with dating apps. They're getting burned out with the digital forms of dating because people have, let's say, wrong expectations. And the recognition of a human being on the other side of that interaction sometimes gets lost when it's purely digital. People are finding it too complicated, too dangerous, too emotionally, let's say, draining to deal with, and they don't want to deal with it. This is different from, for example, meeting someone through a social circle, where a person's reputation is tied in with the experience. And if somebody hurts another person, it damages the reputation within that circle. The, let's say, accountability of human interaction has changed. And in some ways, it seems that The current state we've gotten ourselves into, although you would think it has connected us and made it more easy to meet people, has actually made interaction more complicated. And because it's more complicated and people have to deal with these conflicts that are not face-to-face anymore, a lot of the old standards of ethics and, let's say being willing to listen to their side, we've started to lose it. Now, that being said, this ties into some broader problems because there's also not just the human interaction problem, there's also the financial issue. You can blame this on home shopping. I think it's more than that. But we're facing now another crisis which has to do with credit card debt. And some companies are now looking for other ways around this. Walmart, for example, they're announcing a new payment system. Walmart is going to start bypassing the use of credit cards by letting customers pay directly through their bank accounts. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Walmart has announced a new payment system. Now look, they're going to start bypassing the use of credit cards by letting customers pay directly through their bank accounts. Look at this. This is Bloomberg. The world's largest retailer has offered pay by bank through Walmart's Pay since earlier this year. And it notes that until now, the transactions were akin to digital checks and took roughly 3 days to finalize when being processed through the automated clearinghouse, the same network often used for bill payments or checkout deposit or paycheck deposits. And notes that soon, customers opting for pay-by-bank transactions will see the purchase reflected in their bank account balance instantly. And Walmart will receive the funds immediately, an immediate form of payment bypassing credit cards. And notes the consumer advantage of instant pay-by-bank over debit cards is avoiding stacked pending transactions. For customers carrying low balances, pending transactions can open them up to risk of overdraft or non-sufficient fund fees from their bank. And according to Jamie Henry, Vice President of Emerging Payments at Walmart. Now look, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds a whole lot like digital currency, but I think this is actually a bit different, right? This is actually similar to the way checks used to work. Now, do you remember, again, when you used to carry a checkbook with you, or maybe your mom or dad used to carry a checkbook with them, and they would write checks? You don't really see it these days. Maybe you still get checks from the bank. I personally don't see people paying with checks at stores or whatever else, but when I was a kid, that was normal. Now, what is the importance of that? Well, checks help you avoid credit card companies. Credit card companies are kind of like middlemen, right? They charge companies a lot on every single transaction. They stack additional fees on them. A lot of smaller businesses will only accept cash because they don't want to pay the credit card fees. Go to New York, for example, you find a lot of stores that put an ATM in there. They say, hey, get cash out of the ATM, pay me in cash because I don't want to pay the credit card fees. Some credit card companies charge a lot of money, a percentage on every single transaction. And cutting credit cards also helps people avoid credit card debt. And that's, again, one of the bigger problems we're facing right now. People spending money they don't have. People who pay attention to credit cards, there's kind of a whole game around credit cards, right? Some of what these credit card companies do is they have what's called credit. It's a type of float, right? Where they don't show you what you're spending the current month. They show you the previous month. And when you pay off your credit card debt, oftentimes you only pay off what they're showing you, not the actual debt. And so a lot of people, they say, if they give you advice on credit, try to pay off the float. Try to pay off the whole thing so that you're not in debt. And the debt you're seeing of what you owe to the credit card companies is reflective of what you're actually facing in its entirety. Again, there's a lot of games these companies play because debt is a business. Debt is a game. Debt is how they get you. One of the best lessons I ever got was from my dad, and he told me, never spend money that you don't have. One of the best pieces of advice is, and thanks to that, I never got into debt. I know sometimes it's unavoidable, though. We buy cars, for example, and you have to pay car payments. We buy houses, you have to pay payments on it as well, depending on how you do it. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but in many ways it is avoidable, right? But again, this is one of the challenges we face with the kind of disconnected way that not only human interaction is dealing with, but also the way that money is being dealt with. And adding a type of immediate transaction that bypasses that debt process is something now being looked at. And on that front, too, it's actually interesting. The Department of Justice is actually focusing more on some of the issues of the credit cards. In fact, the Department of Justice, they sued Visa, the world's biggest payment network, and they did this just last month in September on a charge of, quote, monopolizing debt markets. This is the official DOJ press release. Look at this. It says the Justice Department filed a civil antitrust lawsuit today against Visa for monopolization and other unlawful conduct in debit network markets in violations of Section 1 and 2 of the Sherman Act. It notes, the complaint alleges that Visa illegally maintains a monopoly over debit network markets by using its dominance to thwart the growth of its existing competitors and prevent others from developing new and innovative alternatives. Meaning not only is it a monopoly within the credit card market, but also against possible alternatives to their system. Now note that according to the complaint, more than 60% of debt transactions in the United States run on Visa's debit network, allowing it to charge over $7 billion in fees each year for processing those transactions. Again, you pay money just to have the transactions processed, or oftentimes the retailers. The complaint further alleges that Visa illegally maintains its monopoly power by insulating itself from competition. And they state, quote, we allege that Visa has unlawfully amassed the power to extract fees that far exceed what it could charge in a competitive market. Meaning, again, that we're their competition. They do not believe that Visa would be able to have fees of that nature. And it's according to Attorney General Merrick Garland. And he added, quote, merchants and banks pass along those costs to consumers, either by raising prices or reducing quality of service. As a result, Visa's, they say, unlawful conduct affects not just the price of the thing, but the price of nearly everything. Now, Visa, they responded to that. CNBC had it. They said this. Visa called the DOJ suit meritless. And Visa General Counsel Julie Rottenberg said that, quote, today's lawsuit ignores the reality that Visa is just one of many competitors in a debit space that is growing, with entrants who are thriving. And she added, quote, we are proud of the payments network we have built, the innovation we advance, and the economic opportunity we enable. It notes as well that more than 60% of debit transactions in the United States run over Visa rails, helping it charge more than $7 billion annually in processing fees, again, according to the complaint, as we noted. Now, that being said, part of the problem you have is that when you're dealing with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, what does that mean? When they raise interest rates, that's not just something that affects the banks. That's not just something that affects countries and international payments. That's something that affects you, because those raising interest rates affect what you pay for your house. It affects the debt you have. It affects your credit card debt. It means that you are paying money, an additional fee, to try to get us out of this financial crisis, when they say there's not a financial crisis, and that money is creating more pressure on the average person. It's making it so that people are getting buried in debt. And on the point of credit cards, right? The ability to temporarily spend money that you do not have with interest rates, when in your pocket you have a device where at any moment you can buy something impulsively. This is putting a lot of Americans into a cycle of debt, and people are getting trapped in it right now. Epoch Times says this: rising prices and higher interest rates are trapping many Americans in expensive credit card debt, a new report states. According to a survey released Thursday by Bankrate, a financial analytics firm, 37% of American credit card holders have maxed out or nearly maxed out on their credit card limits since the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates in March of 2022. According to the survey, more than half of the respondents who had gone deep into credit card debt blamed inflation, which has reduced the value of the US dollar by more than 20% since 2021. Think about that. Do you know what that means? That means if you had $100 in the bank, the actual effect of inflation is that the $100 has been reduced by 20%. Every $100 you have has lost $20 in value. That is the nature of inflation. Many people who work in finance would say inflation is a hidden tax. How much money do you have in the bank, folks? Think about it. What does it mean? How much money is that if 20% of your money has been taken from you? That is what inflation does. It takes money from you while maintaining the appearance of the same quantity of money. Because the way that money works is it represents a value. If you, for example, have 100 bills in circulation and you double the amount of bills in circulation, you reduce the actual value of them by 50%. And so every time they double the printing of new money, right? They keep printing it, running the presses, keep printing the money. Every time they double the amount in circulation, they reduce the actual value of the currency. And when they do that to a large extent for years and years and years, for you and for the average person, you have $100 in your wallet, you have 20,000 in the bank maybe, that means that the actual effect of it is that the value of your money has been taken out through other means, and you have been paying a hidden tax on it. Add to that other problems, not even just the printing of money. Add to that, again, interest rates. What does that mean? It means that if you owe debt, you have to pay additional money on top of that debt, meaning that not only is your money's value being reduced through inflation, right, through the printing of money, but it also means that the money you have to pay in addition to that is increasing, done in a very silent way. Because of this, it says this, that since 2021, this has been happening. It's left many Americans struggling to afford basic necessities. The second reason, cited by 38% of respondents, was unexpected emergency expenses. You know, a lot of people in this country, they do not have money sitting aside if they have an emergency. A lot of people, my generation especially. It notes as well that according to the Q4 2023 Quarterly Credit Industry Insights Report, CIIR, released in February by TransUnion, a credit rating company, Americans' credit card debt exceeded $1 trillion for the first time on record. And that grew by 13% over the prior growth year. Folks, $1 trillion in credit card debt with rising interest rates. Take that into account of what we're looking at right now with the current state of life and all these other factors. This is another way to look at the economy. And this is important because, you know, like the elections are right around the corner. What do people always say, right? It's the economy, stupid. I find it kind of annoying because you hear it too much, right? It's one of those worn out tropes. But look, it actually has a lot of meaning. There's two sides to the economy. When you look at the economy, which side are you looking at? On one side, we're told the economy is doing great, and technically it is. It is true that if you're watching the stock market, the stocks are doing well. There are people who judge the state of the economy by looking at the stock market. Hey, great, the big corporations are making out like bandits, right? They're doing well, they're succeeding, they're going up. And when people say, hey, look at the economy, it's fantastic. It's true on that side, it actually is. A lot of the big businesses, their stocks are going up, there's a rally in the markets. Many big companies, technically on paper, are doing well. But the question is, does that actually reflect in the experience of the average person? There's a difference between the success of publicly traded companies and the basic well-being of the average citizen. Because while the stocks are rallying, while the stock market is doing fantastic in many regards, the average person is facing now what? $1 trillion in credit card debt, loneliness, depression, other problems like this. Again, the inability to afford basic expenses, the feeling that they can't afford groceries maybe, the feeling that they're getting themselves into a hole and that the prospects of the future are getting worse and they have no retirement. The experience of the individual with inflation, the experience of the individual with debt and interest on debt from the rising interest rates does not reflect the rally on the markets we're seeing on the other side. And this is where it gets important, because what is the thing that will impact how people vote? Probably individual experience. Maybe the big businesses and investors will vote one way, but individual experience is what affects the average person. Now look, in other news, there's growing cases of H5N1 avian virus, and findings now are saying it can spread to humans. And now also this proposal on how to fast-track new vaccines to prepare for this possible future pandemic. And I'll be talking about this only on EpochTV.com. Now, before we jump over, Hurricane Helene left a scene of devastation in its wake. I was just out there. Many people are displaced. Homes and businesses are destroyed. My team and I, we traveled to North Carolina just recently. We were there for a few days, in fact. We met with people who I say are heroes. These people are incredible. There are communities right now uniting. I have never seen anything like this in my life. It was an amazing scene to watch. You have people from all walks of life, no matter what their race or gender identity. I met some of those folks too, joining together and helping out their neighbors. It was incredible. I want to show you what I saw. You can watch this in a new special feature we just released. It's called Heroes of Helene, that is on EpochTV.com. So those of you watching, again, joining us on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, X, there's a link in the description below in the live chat. Click on that. Come and join us on Epoch TV. Watch again the special feature we just published. And not only will you get access to the rest of my episode, and also the live Q&A where I answer your questions, you'll also get important reports and features and issues that really matter. Like, again, our special on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. That said, folks, we're going to jump over now only to EpochTV.com, so make sure you click that link, join us there, and I will see you all on EpochTV.com for the rest of this episode.